Hey guys, welcome back for another review of This Is Us. In this episode, we get to see the aftermath of that phone call from last week where Jack learns of his mother's death. Of course, that is a flashback. So this week we have a flashback episode, and I want to talk a little bit about that. So thank you guys for showing up. My name is Quana, and welcome to Her Real Review. This week's episode is entitled Don't Let Me Keep You. And it comes from a line in the eulogy that Jack delivers to his mother at the very end of the episode. This is a very introspective episode, and it's a very isolated episode. It does not connect to any of the present day storylines. So we are only dealing with the new, younger versions of the big three: Jack, Rebecca, and of course, we're introduced to his mother, reintroduced to his mother by way of even earlier flashbacks. And then, of course, the friends that she's made since she has left Philadelphia and left her abusive husband. I kind of mentioned in last week's review that I wasn't sure how this episode was going to play out and if it was going to feel memorable or meaningful to the fans and to the audience watching This Is Us. Well, I definitely think it struck a chord, especially for members of the audience who have dealt with losing a parent all throughout Twitter. If you were on Twitter last night, it was just literally people sobbing in 140 characters about being able to relate to this storyline. So in terms of impactful, I think it was certainly that. But if I'm judging this from a very critical eye, Milo is good. He's solid he's a solid actor. He's a solid performer. And I think he did a good job in this role. I don't think that this role or this script was as carefully written to really allow him to shine. I think going back and forth with the even earlier flashbacks where he's kind of dealing with his mother through phone conversations and phone calls, and we're kind of seeing that distance between the two of them. It goes back and forth throughout the episode, and I think it doesn't allow us just to sit with what's going on with him in this moment, because we're still in the middle of a flashback. It's literally like they're playing with flashback 80s going forward, and then going back into like earlier late 70s flashback. And I think because of that, we're seeing parts of the relationship that we've kind of already established. It feels like it's just more reminding us of what's already come. And then when we're dealing with him going through the steps in the process of grief, and also dealing with the loss of his mother, because it takes literally the whole episode for that really impactful, really big emotional moment to come, I just didn't feel like as meaningful. And not to pit anyone against each other, but I definitely think that Mandy Moore has had some stronger moments already in this season. And I mentioned last week that I definitely felt like the writing was probably going to be geared toward Mandy Moore and helping her to perhaps have a vehicle toward an Emmy. And certainly the closest episode that we've gotten kind of to this one is the Memphis episode, where we see Randall going to Memphis with William and kind of approaching William's death. And I don't think that this episode lives up to that episode. I definitely feel like that episode has way more rewatchability and way more kind of soulful, meaningful moments. Now, definitely it was a nice surprise to see Cameron Mannheim pop up on our screen. I don't think I've really seen her in anything major since The Practice, and she was definitely my favorite part of that show. And even introducing us to Jack's mom's boyfriend. Those were some nice touches, but all it does is create more questions. Like, I can't help but wonder, especially now that we've had this moment of reckoning where he's realized how much of his mother's life he's missed out on, and that he's essentially cut her out from so much of his life, and now it's too late and she's gone. We don't know where those people were. Debbie and Mike kind of secondhand grandparents to the big three later on? Like, Did they make and maintain any kind of relationship or connection with them? It doesn't seem as though they have. We haven't gotten any inklings of that in any of the previous seasons. So it'll be interesting to see if that's something that happens and if we see more of those individuals in the show. I'm not saying that I want to either, because I definitely don't want too much new stuff going on when we have so many storylines to dive into and to deal with. But usually when we have an episode that deals so heavily in the flashback, there's some type of current tie-in. And obviously the current tie-in is Rebecca's impending death in the future storyline. But that's way far in the future. And in terms of storyline, we're really not there yet. One could say that this is preparing us for that, but I have a lot of ideas of how that's going to go, given how those kinds of scenes have gone in other NBC dramas. And I don't feel like having this so early in this season, when we have such a long way to go before we get to that, I don't think it's really going to have the lasting impact. So again, I just kind of feel like this was an episode that they were giving to Milo, because the character of Jack, there's really not too much more you can do with Jack, because we've seen him come full circle. We've gone through so much of his past storyline, from Vietnam to dealing with his alcoholic and abusive father, to his mom, to Nikki, to all of it, that it kind of just feels like they were trying to throw him a bone for this season, because maybe we're not going to be able to spend as much time in those flashback moments with Jack later on. And I can appreciate that from a script writing perspective, and also just from a perspective of someone who loves the show, loves all the cast members, loves the relationship they have with each other, everything. I can respect that. However, as a fan, there are some frustrating things that come about by having this episode written in the way that it was. And the most important thing that I think all of the fans are really grappling with is Jack is this individual who we have seen reverse so many of his past ills, try to become a better man, all of these things. And so to get an episode which kind of takes place before he's dealt with so many of those demons, we're seeing him drinking. We know that the Jack of his final days was not a drinker, because he had been an alcoholic. We don't see him having any dramatic moment where he realizes he needs to get in touch with Nikki. And I think there was a way that they could have even written that moment in where he makes the attempt and is frustrated because, yes, he's written Nikki off. He's basically told the world that Nikki is dead, but yet he knows, okay, their mother is gone. He needs to reach out to Nikki, and maybe Nikki is unreachable, or Nikki, as a drunkard, kind of cusses him out and blows him off or whatever. I can't help but find fault in Jack, because he doesn't try to reach out to Nikki. And being that, yes, I know what Jack becomes, but now you're bringing me back into who he used to be. It's a very selfish move, and it makes me not love Jack. And we definitely, I use that sparingly, love him in the moment. That I think how are they going to then remind us of the wonderful Jack that we've all known? Because now so many of us are sitting here grappling with the idea that he does not contact his brother, who deservedly needed to know that his mother had died, whether or not, Jack wrote him off and he told the world that he was dead, at least in that. So it just kind of felt a little bit weird in that aspect. But highlights, again, the kind of stoic, begrudging relationship between Debbie and Jack, because Debbie obviously knows all the tea and knows that, hey, you've been, blowing off your mom for all these years, and now you're here. I loved those moments with Cameron Mannheim. Even seeing Rebecca struggle, because at this point in her life, she hasn't cast off her mother and father yet. She is struggling with all of this. So she's trying to be supportive, but not knowing how to be supportive. I saw some people online kind of say, why would she say that I haven't lost a parent? But that is a very true thing. When you're faced with someone who's losing a loved one and you haven't, you are without words. You don't know what to say to make them feel better. You just are like, I'm here for you if you need me. So I thought that that was a very realistic touch. Um, I would have liked a little nod of knowing that the skates and the pond were something that perhaps the big three did later on in life as well. Like maybe we got a moment of, I mean, it's getting really close to too late to be able to use the original younger big three that we had. And so that would have been a kind of a nice moment to see them as teenagers pre Jack's death on skates at this pond. Like this is something that maybe they did as tradition or whatever, but they didn't tie it in with the current storyline at all. So this is like a core memory for Jack, and I don't know if the triplets even remember anything about that. So that was a little bittersweet. So it was a good episode. It definitely, I don't think, had, for me personally, the impact of, let's say, Memphis. But I definitely thought it was a good episode at the end. But it is slow, super, super slow. So trying to watch this episode, I had watched it, and of course, I was also exhausted. So I did not post the first night because I didn't get through it the first night. I had to watch it again. I only got about halfway through before I passed out. So yeah, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't like my favorite at all for this season. And I think as we go forward, it will probably be a pretty forgettable episode, and it won't make my top 10 in terms of what's really moving the story along. So next week we should get back to our regular storyline with all of the juicy stuff. And you know, we got Cassidy visiting Kevin, you know, getting closer to figuring out, is she going to be his wife in the future, or is she just a journey along the way? I'm trying to not to say anything incorrectly, but I love Jennifer Morrison, so I'm so glad to see her again on the show. And we get to see some Kevin stuff going on with Kevin and Madison. Great to see that. You know, we're getting closer, I think, to getting maybe a little bit more with like the Kate and Toby storyline, and they're gonna really need to hit that hard, I think, to make us understand and be okay with Kate and Toby's relationship dissolving, especially if we're going to get to a point where we are accepting of Philip in the future, if at all. But it would be interesting, obviously, that she does get married. And obviously, you know, in the future we see Randall call Toby, but it would be so interesting. And I'm going to go back and look at that scene again. And I encourage you to go back and look at that scene again, because it'll be interesting if Kate and Philip are slated to get married and Toby pulls a Dwayne from a different world. If you don't know the reference, Google it, where he stops the wedding and he runs to the altar and he protests the marriage. That would be a nice little twist. But of course, I'm high in the sky, because we definitely know that baby Jack, grown-up baby Jack, does say that his parents' marriage exploded. So we know that that doesn't happen, but I can still dream and wish. Most importantly, we get Deja and Malik and Randall and Beth, and that's the storyline that I think everybody is like, what did she mean when she told him that's going to be a problem? Like, initially, okay, you about to get your whole life handed to you, but there is something going on there. I don't know. I don't think she's pregnant. Obviously, it was one night and it's only been a week since that. So it's way too soon for her to know if she's pregnant. They're way too young to have gotten married without permission, I think. Although she's 17, I'm not sure if she's 16 or 17. Possibly she could have. So that's going to be super interesting to see, like, what exactly is going on there, where she's given all of that lip. So I'm super excited about next week's episode. Let me know down below in the comments what you thought about this week's episode. Did you enjoy it? Did it relate to you? Did it resonate? Like I said, I don't want anybody to come away thinking I did not like the episode all in all. I just don't think that it served a true function in the lifespan of the show in the way that for me, in the way that I think the writers and Dan Fogelman wanted it to, maybe I wasn't the target audience. So maybe you were. So let me know down below in the comments what you thought about tonight's episode. And I will see you guys next week. Until then, toodles.